Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everybody. Going to talk about something today that a lot of us deal with. It's on our mind. It comes up every single day. I'm talking about artificial intelligence, AI. This thing that is generated digitally. There's a lot of great there, but there's a lot of challenges there. And with that, we are talking about ethics. And we're going to talk with a guy today who is spent many years, in fact, as a researcher, as a teacher, of a professor, teaching business ethics. And he's back with us. Ronald Berenbeim joins us on the program talking about AI today. Welcome back. How are you?
Fine, Steve. Good to be with you. Thanks for inviting me on this subject. You may recall that the last podcast we did was during President's Week, the Gettysburg Address, social media, and AI. And ever since then, there has been hardly anything that hasn't been about AI, one way or the other, in the news. And so, like the old time boxers say, I can run, but I can't hide. So I better say something about that today. So shall I begin, or?
Yeah, there's so many aspects of AI, right down to simulations, parodies of celebrities that are out there, where there are some lawsuits pending. George Carlin being one of them. That happened about a month or so.
That,
yeah, I mean that's just the starting point there. But what's acceptable in terms of ethics and what is not? How about why don't we talk about some of the concepts, some of the key concepts involving it?
Okay, well, that's where we start. And there are a couple of good articles in the New Yorker online for subscribers only, New Yorker Daily, that have gone into this in some detail. But basically, and these people are very active and committed AI people, but they're very concerned as well. So what this fellow says is, if you want to think about AI, think about a forest, okay? And you are sitting at the base of a tree in the middle of this vast forest. And what do you see? Well, you see some bark, you may see some leaves, you may not be able to see to the top of the tree. You may see some other trees that are around, you see what's on the ground. That is what you see. But suppose every tree in that forest, there was a person sitting under that tree like you, looking around. People with different kinds of eyesight, different kinds of experience, who might derive different conclusions from sitting under that tree. So as you climb your tree and they climb theirs, at each level there is an additional layer of information that comes in. Finally, when you get to the top, it's open, you can see the whole forest, you can see the sky, you can see everything. And then again, you have a different, you're not necessarily different from, rather you are seeing something probably different from all the thousands of other people who are sitting on top of the thousands of other trees. And what AI does with its algorithms and its various other devices is it consolidates all of these observations into a single reality, a single picture, a single piece of information, and so on and so forth. And that's what happens. So if they're doing the thing right, they may want to distort it. So they may have only certain people climb certain trees or whatever. But if they're honest and that's what they really want to do, then this is the outcome. Unfortunately, that's the final product. So that addresses the issue of reliability, the whole process does. And then to what use is it being put? And of course, sometimes it's being put to good use. We've read stories about that. Sometimes it's not. And so many of AI's most ardent proponents are fearful. The writer of one of these articles said that roughly that the consensus among the various IA people polled in a survey said that as AI continues to build on what it has learned and become increasingly sophisticated and becoming increasingly confident of what it can accomplish, even though it may not be able to, there's about a 10% chance that they'll blow up the world. Now, that's a pretty horrific scenario. Kind of reminds me of the film Oppenheimer, which most people have seen, where these people are developing this fantastic weapon that is designed to literally destroy and end a war against people who are doing them great harm, doing the world great harm, and they think they're doing the right thing. And then they begin to, then that war ends without them ever having used it for that purpose. Then they go on to use it on the Japanese, and people start thinking twice about it, and they've never stopped thinking twice about it since. That is what AI, dangers of AI, the concept of AI, and so on. So let's go to our ethics frame where we analyze the problem or the issue or whatever it is within the three lenses: the greatest good for the greatest number, law, and then ethics and virtue. Okay, greatest good for the greatest number. There's no question that it does enormous amount of good, certainly for the people who have developed it. You're a business network, you know that the top performing stock in the last quarter or whatever it is, at a huge premium, I can't remember the name of the company, but is an AI company. And that AI companies have been just tearing the market up as far as appreciation. So they're certainly making their investors and their shareholders rich. And the people for whom they've custom designed products and services may be pretty satisfied, but there's not near enough transparency as to what those products and services are, who the consumers are, and what the consumers want to do with the product and services. So take your George Carlin example. They were developing, it seemed like a fun thing to do, to recreate George Carlin and have basically a film of him for people who were great fans of his, of whom I am one, and so are you. But justifiably, his daughter or his daughters, I forget whether there was more than one, they considered that a violation of their privacy, and they didn't like what they saw. That didn't look like him to them, or at least that was not not the way they wanted him to be remembered, and nobody ever asked their permission or told them that it was being done. I think most of that stuff by then was in the public domain anyway, and it was just a sort of aggregation, collation, whatever you want to call it, of the various different things that was out there in the ecosphere. And so they certainly didn't benefit. So maybe the aggregate benefit is huge in terms of investors and in terms of consumers, but the aggregate harm to some people may outweigh that aggregate good, and certainly it needs to be balanced. The two need to be balanced.
It's an interesting
Yeah,
view
go ahead.
of the George Carlin situation. I'm a huge fan, have been since I was a teenager. And when I heard that somebody recreated him, of course, he passed away about 10 years ago or more.
2007, I believe.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. Side note, personal side note, I had tickets to go see him at a venue in the Hamptons because I'm in New York, Long Island, and he passed away a day before the show, and I never got to see him.
Quite sudden, my God.
Yeah, yes, yes. And he did have heart issues over the years and such. Um, when I heard that somebody recreated George Carlin through I have to admit, I was excited. I was like, all right, it's not the real deal, but well, you know, if AI is so good, they should be able to take his voice and maybe even automatically generate comedy bits based on his style. This is going to be interesting. Press the button, watch it on it's a YouTube video or was, it's been since taken down. I have to tell you, I was not only disappointed, I was somewhat disgusted that it wasn't even close to his voice, his cadence, his delivery, and the content was just not funny. Side note, they show images of the things that he's talking about. Let's say he walked into an ice cream shop. There's a stock photo of an ice cream shop or whatever. And it's just like a slideshow of, just fading from one to another. It was more about his voice and the content. It was garbage. And I can see the uproar over it. It wasn't even close. So my feeling is if it's not going to be good, don't even mess with it because now you're messing with a gentleman's life and his work. And based on what I saw there, that one's off my table. All of this is off my my acceptable table in terms of AI. Yes, there's other AI out there, and there's a lot of benefits to it, but trying to recreate a celebrity, even if it's a singer, I don't think it can be done. And one other note here: if you believe in energy, and some guy named Einstein did, and that everything we do, we put energy into it. Art, music, everything. There's an energy signature that goes into it that we receive when we either look at something or hear something. I believe that was missing from the George Carlin AI generated bit because there was no energy put into it from a human. It was a machine.
Exactly.
And they did say, and why do some artists resonate with us and others don't? There's millions of artists. How come there's only you can name a typical person, maybe 5 artists, Van Gogh, Rembrandt, etc. They did say before the George Carlin video, they made it clear. So I'm going to give them a check mark
There was
there.
full disclosure. That was
And they pushed it hard. They said, again, we are letting you know this is not really George Carlin. It is generated by artificial intelligence. So, kudos in that regard, but the whole thing, just not impressed with the way it was done. And I don't, maybe it'll get better down the road. And I personally have a more open mind to it, but that one busted it for me. What are your thoughts? Take Saturday Night Live. They parody celebrities all the time. And sometimes you may not even know it's, a parody. Yeah, there are people out there that might look and see, a Trump walking out there, played by an actor, comedian, and may not believe, may think that maybe, oh, that's Trump right there. What are your thoughts, Ronald, ethically in terms of recreating celebrities, musicians, whatever it might be with AI?
Well, it's transparency, 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 disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. And the YouTube that you wanted to watch and did, they saw it as being in their interest to disclose, because they were saying, if we can do this with George Carlin, we can do this with Mozart, we can do this with Beethoven, we could do this with W.C. Fields. Just watch us. We can do this with people for whom there is no film footage. People you've always wanted to see do their thing in front of you.
Mm.
And so it's to their credit, I guess that they disclosed it, but they also had a personal interest in disclosing it. And that should not be forgotten. But this is not about me and what I think, because whatever you may think of the United Nations, UNESCO is on the job. They have had a number of conferences that address these issues. They have issued guidelines for how this sort of thing should be done in terms of disclosure and so on, what the potential adverse consequences may be, and so on and so forth. So, and what the dangers are. So, but of course, UNESCO is not a legislative body, has 193 members. Each of those countries sends a representative, one would hope, or most of them do, and then they go back to their countries and they propose legislation, or they don't, or they tell concerned industry groups that you may not be interested in having this rule here, but if you do business in X, they're very interested, and we saw that at the conference. So there is a conversation, as people like to say in politics, going on about this, and it's global, and it's being addressed at the highest level. But ultimately, when you talk about our frame, you can't avoid the last one, which is virtue and ethics, and the whole idea that of the pursuit of happiness and what that means, and what that is the ultimate objective is by virtuous citizens being virtuous towards one another, pursuing virtuous collective objectives, and having civic virtue, which means, as Tocqueville described in his tour around the US in 1846, these little small towns with people on school boards and people on church breakfast committees and so on, and kind of making a sort of common law of virtue. And what ought to be the major concern of ethicists, philosophers, even lawyers and judges and politicians is artificial intelligence a sign that we are moving from civic virtue, which is concern about our community, to consumer virtue, which is just concern about how accurate and effective the product is, both as a consumer, as you were in the case of George Carlin, and as a purveyor, as George Carlin's daughters claim the purveyor was not. So they seem to be shifting the focus of the argument or of the discussion in a direction we don't, which is not the best, but nonetheless, it has to be done because, and it may crowd out the higher level of virtuous concerns, which I guess is best described. Many people have used this phrase. The most recent one, my idea of recent, was President Kennedy, who said, and he didn't say it about virtue, but he said it about an effective performance, the full use of vital powers along lines of excellence in a life affording them scope. So I think that's a good place to break off, and we can talk about
it's amazing where this can go when you think of it. We just have a couple of minutes left here, but we're talking about used in entertainment. If this goes to the level of court, imagine if AI at some point, I'm going hypothetical here, is deciding on court cases, where's the bias? What's the baseline for that one? Because it could happen, right?
We could save a lot of money on Supreme Court judges and whether or not they go on yachts and all this kind of stuff. If we just had, 9 different AI companies weigh in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think that's a good idea?
I get a queasy feeling in my stomach, and I know, I've heard that the use of AI in the judicial system around the world is increasing, and there's, lots of ethical questions to explore here. But it as much as people may complain about a judge, wow, that wasn't fair, that's not right. Can AI do it? Can AI render a decision in a court case, assumably based on other cases? I don't know. What are your thoughts? Last thought here today. What do you think about that?
The most fundamental concept of justice is that you are being judged by a jury of your peers. Now, my peers are not pieces of equipment. My peers are other people, whether I agree with them or not, whether they agree with me or not. They are still my peers, not a piece of equipment.
100%. And I feel that AI is not neutral. There could be decisions that are inaccurate or discriminatory, or there's bias involved in there. And AI is only as strong as where it gets its data from. But if it doesn't process that data well, where are you at with that? It's kind of scary when you think of that.
It doesn't process it in a human way. I mean,
right.
There may be instead of 12 jurors, there may be 1 million jurors. They may be consolidating hundreds of different research reports, but it's still not being done by a human being.
Right. I believe that that's one area you can't take the place of. I maybe in the future somehow, but I'm not seeing it now. Such a trending topic, Ronald, and appreciate all your views on the ethical aspect of it. Somebody wants to engage, has some questions, wants to reach out to you personally. How would they do that?
Well, it's Ronald.Berenbeim. Let me spell that one for you. BERENBEIM @gmail.com.
Great talking with you today. Additional feedback, instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. I assure and promise you, between the two of us, you will get a personal reply. It won't be automated.
Just be the two of us. No artificial intelligence.
Yeah, this is the real deal. Ronald, thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcasts on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.